Come over here. I thought of a new idea.
Mr. Wallace put forward a theory that's too fantastic to explain.
Do you mean that a bomb can bounce along the water like a ping pong ball?
That's no good, it's too short. You're going to attack the great dams of Western Germany. Stand by, everyone. We're going in. At low level.
It sounds a bit far-fetched. Looks impossible.
If we can surprise them, then we'll play hell with them.
It's still there!
Some of you might be familiar with that excellent 1955 film telling the story of Project Chastise, the daring raid on several dams in the Ruhr Valley in Germany, which was such a key event in bringing the Second World War to an end. It took place in May 1943 and involved 19 Lancaster bombers and 133 airmen. The raid required the aircraft to overcome German defences by flying at ridiculously low levels before dropping a specially designed bomb which would bounce across the surface of the reservoir water before detonating against the dam wall. My short film is definitely not an attempt to remake that 1955 film. However, it does tell the story of a bike ride I planned to coincide with the 80th anniversary of the Dam Busters raid. It involved me trying to replicate the journey made by the airmen all those years ago, and features a few places, people and activities which have been very relevant to me and my family over the years. I really enjoyed it, and I hope you find it interesting too. So we're starting our story in Poynton, which is the place that I live now. It's a really nice place to live. It's got a great village feel to it, yet it's still really close to the major city conurbation of Manchester. Let's go and take a closer look. So for people like me who like their cycling and their walking, Poynton's quite a unique place in the UK, and it operates a shared space system whereby there are no road signs, traffic lights or other conventional ways of controlling traffic. The idea is that everyone just gives way to each other in an informal, friendly way that respects all road users, whether they're pedestrians, horse riders, cyclists or in motor vehicles. Not everyone likes it, but I think it's pretty cool. And it's got a similar vibe to many towns in Holland, which we'll maybe see later in the film. You're probably wondering now, what on earth though is the relevance of Poynton to a film about the Dam Busters? Well, let's hit warp speed and go and find out. Earlier this year, this new relief road was built to take some of the heavy traffic away from Poynton. It's called the Roy Chadwick Way, and it's actually named after the engineer who designed the Lancaster bomber. We'll head down the bypass now and have a look for a bit more evidence of what was here before the bypass was built. So we're a bit further down the road now, and you can see there's a plaque here telling the story of Roy Chadwick. He led a team of engineers at an aircraft factory and airfield very close to this site before he was tragically killed during a test flight in 1947, aged 54. And we're going to go and have a look and see if we can see any more evidence of where he worked and where the aircraft were based. So we've come off the new road now, and a bit naughty, but we've climbed over a fence to find the remains of the main runway that was used at Woodford. In the very distance you can also see that there's a Vulcan bomber still here, which was built here in the post-war period and was also a strong connection with RAF Scampton that we'll be visiting later, where the Vulcans mainly flew from. But it's Lancasters that we're really interested in, and over 3,000 of them were assembled here during the war before being delivered to RAF bases around the UK, including RAF Scampton, where Dam Buster 617 Squadron was based. And it was also here where the modifications were made to allow the Lancasters to carry the bouncing bombs that were used for Project Chastise. So I'm glad we've been able to see this, because I suspect before too long it will all disappear under a new housing estate that is being built. We'll be visiting Scampton later in the film, but before we leave the northwest, I just want to visit a couple of other places that do have a strong connection to the Dam Busters and have also been very relevant to me in the time that I've lived in this area. So firstly, we've come to Manchester University. Now, I was a student here over 40 years ago now. That's what first brought me to the northwest. And Roy Chadwick was also a student here. He was here between 1907 and 1911, so quite a bit earlier than me. I'm quite surprised that there's not really any reference to him here, other than a really small plaque inside one of the buildings. There is, however, a building within the university that's named after the scientist, engineer and inventor who developed the bouncing bomb that was used in the Dam Busters raid and was really the brains behind Project Chastise. That was Barnes Wallis, and quite sad really, I just had a look inside and this building now appears to be derelict, so I don't know whether it's due for demolition or not. But this was actually the very first building that I came to for my interview when I came here as a prospective student in 1981. I was never quite sure why the university decided to name the building after Barnes Wallis, as I don't think there was any real connection with him. However, it definitely has really fond memories for me. During my time as a student, this building also served as one of the main students' unions, and it was the venue for many a good night out in the 1980s. And now we're in the glorious Peak District, where much of my cycling has been based since moving to the area. Derwent Reservoir is a particularly beautiful area. It is also one of the locations where 617 Squadron practiced night after night in the months running up to the raid. There's a nice memorial here, and there's a small museum that tells the story of the practicing in more detail. It's 13th of May now, and I am in Lincoln for the weekend. There is a major cycling sportive taking place today, which I'm hopefully going to get all the way around, 100 miles around the Lincolnshire countryside. And it's time to coincide with a big bike race tomorrow, the Lincoln Grand Prix, that we'll hopefully see a bit of too. So as we go around, I'll try and capture one or two landmarks that might be of relevance to the Dam Busters. I'm not going to film the whole ride, but that'll be boring, but hopefully we'll pick up one or two highlights. We've now done over 90 miles now. I'm feeling pretty jaded. It's been quite a high pace with the guys a lot younger than me. But anyway, we'll be heading shortly to the finish back in the historic city of Lincoln. But I've just stopped here to show you the back of RAF Scampton. So this is a spot I used to stop at regularly when cycling in this area as a teenager. And in those days you could see Vulcan bombers practicing landing, taking off for hours on end, and sometimes you might see the Red Arrows practicing their display. So you get a great preview of the aerobatic displays they took to air shows all over the world. This is also where I got my first taste of bike racing as a teenager. So the RAF used to allow local cycling clubs to use the perimeter circuit and the runway for bike racing. And it wasn't unusual to end up sprinting for the line with a group of about 200 riders on a nice wide closed road. But that tarmac runway that we used to use actually wasn't put there until after the war. So at the time of Project Chastise, that runway was grass, and it was from here that the 19 Lancasters took off for the Dam Busters raid, each loaded with a single 9,000 pound bouncing bomb. So we're going to head for Lincoln now, and I might just put my camera on as we go up the final climb up the steep hill up to the cathedral, and then it's finished. There you go. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Wow, so that climb up Michael Gate was pretty stiff, and I'm glad that's over. It's brought me to Lincoln Cathedral at the top of the hill, and this is where the RAF band are going to be playing a special concert tonight to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the Dam Busters raid. I'm not going, but my mum and dad are, and I'm sure they'll have a good time. And then for me now, with my finisher's medal around my neck, it's all done for today, and looking forward to a bit more adventure tomorrow. So it's now Sunday the 14th of May 2023. So it's 80 years since final preparations for Project Chastise were being made. We're about a mile from Mum and Dad's house, visiting the International Bomber Command Centre, which tells the story of bombing act during World War II and acts as a memorial to the airmen and women who lost their lives in the Second World War. So the 102-foot tall spire records the names and looks magnificent set against the backdrop of Lincoln Cathedral, which was a major landmark for aircraft returning from nightly bombing raids. Except that today it's pretty misty, so you can hardly see the cathedral. And there's been a special installation put here to mark Project Chastise, showing images of the airmen that didn't make it back from the Dam Buster bombing raids. And I'm here with my dad, who's a regular visitor to this, being a very local resident. So yeah, Dad, tell me about your memories of being in the RAF then, and any connections that you had with the Dam Busters.
Well, I did 22 years. I first met a Dam Buster pilot out in Cyprus when he was station commander at Nicosia. But because my boss at the time was good friends with him, I used to get the job of driving him about in a Land Rover. And I can remember one Christmas, all the billets on camp used to have their own bar, and the CEO was supposed to go around and judge for the best bar. Well, there were about 20, and I'm in the Land Rover, and after about 10 bars he was sat in the seat next to me, cap on back to front, shouting and singing. I came back home, and a few years later I was at Odeon,
Yeah.
and who should be the AOC there but Mickey Martin, the Dam Buster pilot.
Yeah.
And he recognised me straight away, and we had a chat, and we got on well.
Yeah.
He once did see me out in Odeon in the village without me cap on, and he sent a little note saying I'm supposed to wear my cap on, I'm supposed to salute officers in future.
And what about RAF Scampton then? What was it like working there?
Lancaster, we had at the gate, used to get cannibalised for spares, and I don't really know what happened to it, but and they had a dummy bouncing bomb.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it looked like a barrel, didn't it? Everyone thought it'd be a big round bomb, but it was like a barrel.
That's right. It just looked like a dustbin.
Yeah.
On its side. Well, Guy Gibson's dog was buried in front of a hangar, and I'm not supposed to say what his name was, but it was there for everyone to see. I think now they're going to move it because the station is being used for
asylum seekers. Yeah.
Asylum seekers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what will happen to it, I don't know.
Yeah.
There was some where I worked in SHQ. There was a room that Guy Gibson was supposed to have worked in, and his ghost was supposed to walk about, but I never saw it. People did say they'd seen it, but I think that was just a story.
Yeah, very good. So we're now back at RAF Scampton. This is the front gate and the main building, which features heavily in the 1955 Dam Busters film. It's also where my dad was based in the 1970s and 80s. And as you might have heard him say, there was in those days there was a Lancaster bomber parked right in front of it, just here, together with a bouncing bomb. But sadly, these are long gone, and the station has been decommissioned. So no evidence now of it being an RAF base, and it's currently being prepared to house up to 2,000 asylum seekers. So this now is the official start of my adventure, and we're leaving here just a day or so ahead of the 80th anniversary of the raid. And unfortunately I can't ride at the same speed as a Lancaster, but my aim is to get to the Ruhr Valley just in time for the anniversary. So wish me the best of luck, and away we go. So here's the first major milestone of the ride, the mighty Humber Bridge. So until 1998 it was the world's longest suspension bridge, and it was great for me when it opened in 1981, as it significantly shortened the journey from Lincoln to Hull, which is where Jane, my wife, lived when we first started going out together in the 1980s. And hopefully when we get to the other side we might see Jane. We're going to call in at her mum's where she's visiting at the moment. But what a beautiful day to be crossing the bridge. So we're at Jane's mum's now, having come over the bridge.
Have we been done?
Yeah.
And Mum and Dad are here as well, and Cassie are here.
Cassie's down there. She's got really fed up with the whole thing now.
They have packed me up with masses of food. So my pannier on my bike is now.
And sick tablets.
And sick tablets, yeah. So I've got most of the pannier is made up of food, and then there is a pair of spare underpants in there and some sick tablets for the ferry. But otherwise we are all set to go. So goodbye everyone, and look forward to seeing you later in the week.
Bye, love you.
You sure none of you want to come?
Bye.
No.
So good morning everyone. Whilst the Lancasters were able to cross the North Sea in 1943 via various routes, there was only really one option for me, and that was to get the overnight ferry from Hull to Rotterdam. Thankfully it was a really smooth crossing, and I'm now riding through Holland, which is a delight really, as is a country which is where bikes are the main form of transport, so some lovely cycle tracks that most of the journey is going to be taken on. And today's Monday the 15th of May, and it's now exactly 80 years on this day that the Air Ministry gave orders for Project Chastise to go ahead. And up until this stage, the pilots and aircrew of 617 Squadron hadn't been told what their targets were. But over the next 24 hours, the aircraft were made ready, bombs were loaded, and the final crew selections were made. And the crews were shown some scale models of their targets: the Mona, the Ada and the Sorpe dams in the Ruhr Valley. I've got about 200 miles to go to cycle across Holland and Germany to reach the dams. I'm not going to film the whole journey, but perhaps I'll check in along the way if we come across anything of interest. So I've made pretty good progress across Holland on some really excellent cycle paths, and I'm just crossing the border into Germany. It's not really a very exciting sign. I almost missed it, just up there you see. I'm just having a rest on a bench, given it seems a suitable point to do that. Obviously not all of the Lancasters that took part in Project Chastise made it this far. 19 aircraft were organised into 3 waves, each of which took a very different route to the target. And one of the waves took a very northerly route, much more northerly through Holland than the way I've come, and it suffered some really early casualties, partly due to some very heavy German defences in the very northern part of Holland. So the aircraft K King was hit by anti-aircraft fire almost as soon as it reached the coast and crashed into the Wadden Sea. W Willie was severely damaged and had to immediately turn for home, and H Harry was flying so low that it hit the water and lost its bomb. Unfortunately the aircraft was still airworthy and also turned for home. For the remaining aircraft, the big challenge was how low they had to fly to avoid being picked up by German radar systems, sometimes so low that they had to fly underneath electricity cables. But unfortunately not all of them made it through those power lines, so 2 of them suffered casualties as a result of that. E Easy and B Baker both hit the overhead cables just over the German border and crashed, killing all on board. So that left just 14 Lancasters from the original 19 to continue their journey towards the targets. So I'm going to continue my journey now, and I'll tell you a bit more of the story tomorrow as I hopefully get into the Ruhr Valley area. So we're well into Germany now, and we've picked up the mighty River Rhine, which would have been a fantastic navigational aid for anyone flying in the dark through Germany heading down towards the Ruhr Valley, which is where we are heading ourselves now. If anyone wants to buy a van, I think I found some. So good morning. It's now the 16th of May and it's a beautiful day, which is great because the end of my 150-mile ride from Rotterdam yesterday ended up being pretty awful with heavy rain for the last hour. Whoops. So that made it pretty unpleasant getting into Schönbeck, which is where I stayed last night. But it's, as I say, it's a beautiful morning today. It's really nice to wake up and find the sun shining, and the ride today down to the Mona Dam is largely like this. It's cycle tracks, old railway lines and so on. So 16th of May is exactly 8 years since Project Chastise commenced, and it makes you feel quite emotional really, thinking about the brave airmen that flew their way down here. Puts any hardship I had with a bit of rain into context, and as I say, hopefully by about lunchtime we'll reach the dam. It's about 70 miles from here, so I'll tell you more then. So we've now made it to the Mona Dam. It's been a beautiful morning cycling through forest trails and lovely German countryside in warm sunshine. So my shoes are just about dried out after yesterday's drenching. And as you can see from the open aspect of the reservoir here, this had a much easier, more open approach than the other dams, but it was also the most heavily defended. So there were over 40 German gunners in place here, including on both of the dam towers. You can only see one of them here, but we'll go and have a look at the other one later. And the first Lancaster to attack the dam was Guy Gibson's G. George. He had to fly incredibly low over the water here, just about 20 metres or so below the true height, and he dropped his bomb at the very first attempt. There was a huge spurt of water at the dam wall as it exploded, but that wasn't enough to breach it. So we're right on the dam now, and you can see the scale of it together with the two towers that were heavily armoured. The next aircraft to come in was M Mother, which, although it was set on fire by direct hits from the German gunners, still managed to release its bomb, which bounced right over the dam and landed on a power station below it 200 feet down. Unfortunately, the aircraft was fatally wounded and then crashed into the ground a few miles beyond the dam, killing all but 3 crew who managed to parachute out. We're right in the centre of the dam now, in between the two towers. So the next plane to attack after M Mother was P Popsy, which was also hit by shells just at the moment it released its bomb. This bomb hit the dam wall just about where we're standing now, but failed to breach it. So by this stage the crews were starting to question whether or not the mission would or could succeed. After a few minutes reflection, A Apple went in, flanked by 2 other aircraft which tried to protect it by drawing some of the enemy fire. A Apple also managed a direct hit when it released its bomb, but unfortunately again it wasn't enough to break the dam. Finally, at the 5th attempt, J Johnny came in and dropped its bomb, which exploded against the dam and caused a massive breach exactly where we're standing now, resulting in a tidal wave of water gushing down into the valley below. After surveying the damage, 2 of the Lancasters, which had dropped their bombs, headed for home, and Guy Gibson's G. George headed for the nearby Ada Dam to meet up with 4 other aircraft which had headed directly there. We don't have time to visit the other dams, but in brief, they presented a pretty major challenge. The Ada was surrounded by steep wooded hillsides, requiring a dogleg approach and a steep climb after the bomb was released. L Leather went first and had 4 attempts before pulling out to let Z Zebra have a go. Z Zebra tried twice, unsuccessfully, and then handed back to L Leather. L Leather finally dropped its bomb on its 6th attempt, scoring a direct hit but not enough to cause a breach. Z Zebra then followed up but dropped the bomb too late, such that it flew straight over the dam without bouncing. N Nuts went next and made a perfect drop on the first attempt, creating a large hole in the dam and releasing over 500 million cubic feet of water into the valley below. Finally, the Sorper Dam was attacked. It was undefended, but the approach to it was also extremely difficult and dangerous. T. Tommy made 9 aborted runs before eventually dropping its bomb on the 10th attempt. Unfortunately, this didn't do enough damage to cause a breach. And a late wave of aircraft had been dispatched from Scampton to provide additional firepower should it be needed. But by this stage, German defences had been alerted, and several of these were brought down in Germany before reaching their target. F. Freddy did make it to the Sorper and made 7 runs before finally dropping its bomb. Unfortunately, this too wasn't sufficient to cause a breach, and with daylight coming, no further attacks were made.
But for war-weary Britain, it was electrifying.
I've got news. Bomber Command struck last night a heavy blow.
Churchill's propaganda machine presented the raid as a turning point in the Allies' struggle, and the dam busters became overnight celebrities.
We saw it splattered all over the papers the next morning. It was, God, did we do that? It proved to the German hierarchy that what they thought was impregnable, the Royal Air Force could get through and destroy. I think perhaps the most important thing was the morale effect it had on the people of this country, because it was a change in the direction of the war. We were winning something, we had won something, the boost was there.
So I'm heading for home now, but maybe tomorrow we'll find out a bit more about how the remaining Lancasters fared on their journey home. But before going home, we're just going to head a few miles downstream, following the Mona River, to the town of Neheim, which was the first major conurbation to feel the brunt of the tsunami of water which was released when the dam was breached. So we're now entering the town of Neheim. It's just a few miles downstream of the Mona Dam, and it's also where the Mona and the Ruhr rivers meet at the head of the Ruhr Valley, which is Germany's industrial heartland. 330 million tonnes of water were released from the Mona Dam alone 80 years ago today, and a 10-metre high wall of water flooded towns and cities up to 50 miles away, including this one, destroying all in its wake, including power stations, factories, houses, bridges and roads. We spent much of this trip focusing on the casualties amongst the Commonwealth pilots and crew which took part in Project Chastise. However, it would be wrong not to mention the extent of civilian casualties. It's estimated that about 600 Germans and over 1,000 prisoners of war, mainly Russians, were killed by the flooding. Being so close to the dam, it's not surprising that Neheim was hit very badly, and over 800 people died here alone. There's a very ornate memorial in the town, just in front of me here. So on that very sombre note, I am going to start heading for home now, but we'll visit at least a couple of other sites tomorrow where I can tell you a little more about what happened to the Lancasters and crew that didn't make it back to Scampton. So it's the 17th of May now, and I am on my way home, so I'm nearly into Holland now. I've ridden through again some really nice lanes in Germany on what's been a really pleasant morning, although there's a biting headwind that's going to niggle me all the way back, I suspect. But as I said yesterday, I'll want to stop a couple of places along the way just to show you what happened to some of the Lancasters that didn't make it back, unfortunately. So you might remember from my description yesterday of the aircraft that attacked the Mona Dam. One of them, Z Zebra, dropped its bomb late. It bounced over the dam and then exploded in the valley below, causing damage to the aircraft. And the damage wasn't so severe that it couldn't continue. The plane then turned for home, and really sadly it was then attacked here close to the Dutch-German border at a town called Emmerich, and it crashed as a result of that, and everyone on board was killed. And I found a small memorial at the side of the road here that I almost missed. Actually, it's not that large, but it records the names of the crew of Z Zebra. And what's really sad is that you can see that the pilot was only aged 21, and that was fairly typical of many of the crew. I'm quite surprised that there's no one else here actually, because it is almost exactly 80 years since that happened. It was the early hours of this morning 80 years ago, although there is a wreath left here yesterday by the looks of it, so by some other people that are cycling, so clearly I'm not the only person that's doing this. And this is from a group of people from Henry the pilot's hometown of Leamington Spa, and it sounds like they're going on to the Mona Dam afterwards. So for me, it's back on the bike now. I am going to try and pay a visit to, there's a war cemetery near the Reichswald forest that I think I can try and call in on my way back. But otherwise, it is heading now towards Holland, about 120 miles to go, as I say, and that's going to be fun in this niggling headwind, but at least I am homeward bound now and all set to catch a ferry back across to the UK tonight. I've also stopped to visit this cemetery in the Reichswald forest, where over 7,500 Commonwealth servicemen are buried, all of whom died in World War II. Now this is where the crew of Z Zebra, that's the crash site that we saw in Emmerich, were buried, together with the crews of B Baker, E Easy and C Charlie. B Baker and E Easy both crashed before reaching the dams after hitting power lines, and C Charlie was also shot down not too far from here. In total, 27 men died in those 4 aircraft. There was, however, one miracle amongst all of the sadness. Fred Tees, the rear gunner of C Charlie, was severely burned and concussed, but managed to stagger from the wreckage before being captured by local German farmers. He spent the rest of the war in a prisoner of war camp, but was incredibly lucky given the fate of his colleagues. I've had a look around to see if I can find the graves of any of the Project Chastise airmen, but there are just so many here that without a map or a guide you really haven't got a hope. Very, very sad place, but also very peaceful and very well kept. Here we are as we're coming to the end of Germany. We're passing the River Rhine again on this rather nice bridge, although it's not really as good as the Humber Bridge, is it? The Dutch do some bridges too. They're still not as good as the Humber. Great thing about cycling in Holland is that much of it is on these cycleways that are like this one, totally separate from the traffic, and in many ways it's a better built road than the road for vehicles. Dedicated for cyclists, crisscrossing the whole country. Just amazing. I really wish we had these at home. So yeah, much of the last 100 miles has been like this really. So yeah, thumbs up for Holland. It's been a really, really enjoyable experience. Good morning. It's the 18th of May now. Back in the UK after a very calm crossing across the North Sea last night, and I've ridden down from Hull this morning through the Lincolnshire Wolds, and I'm now in some of the flatter lands heading towards the Lincoln area. And as you can see, it's beautiful down here, so quiet, peaceful. I'm taking a slightly longer route home. We're going to call in at a place called Wardhall Spa. So although 617 Squadron were based at Scampton, The officers lived in Woodall Spa, a town a few miles away, and I'm told that there is a memorial there that we're going to take a look at before then we complete our journey. So let's, I'll check in with you then, and I'll continue to enjoy this lovely scenery. Look at this, first puncture of the trip. Done 650 miles, and I'm only about 10 miles from the end, just on this track in Lincolnshire, heading towards Woodall Spa, and we've got front wheel puncture. Never mind, let's get on and mend it. Back on the road now, but that's really annoying. There's a brand new tyre I put on for this trip. It's got a big split in it that I've had to do a temporary repair on. Hopefully it will get me home now. But also, it's also the first time I've worn my short sleeves and shorts today, and just standing there, it's like a bit of a nature reserve down here, but absolutely bitten to death by little flies while mending that. But can't complain, let's carry on. So I finally made it to Woodall Spa, and there is indeed a very impressive memorial here in the shape of a dam, with a breach in the middle of it represented by this single slab of carved slate. And there was clearly a number of visitors yesterday, judging by the wreaths at the bottom, yesterday being, you know, the 80th anniversary. So nice to see this represented here, and whilst I've been stood here, quite a few people have visited and clearly have got relatives or people they were close to that were involved in some way with this, come to pay their respects. Amazing thing just happened to me. I am in the last 10 miles of my ride now, way back into Lincoln. The Battle of Britain Memorial flight just came right overhead. The sound of those engines is just incredible, and you can recognise it anywhere. So fantastic coincidence for me that it's happened right now, and really glad that I saw that. Oh, after the excitement of seeing the Battle of Britain Memorial flight, I just pressed on for the last few miles, and with a few minutes to spare before I'm due to get back to my parents' house, I thought let's just call in and bring this trip to a more formal close by a final visit to the Bomber Command Centre. So we're back inside the Bomber Command Centre now, and this is I think we saw this earlier in the film, this is the special installation that's been put in place to depict the 53M, and it didn't make it back from the raid. So of the 19 Lancasters that took part in it, only 11 made it back safely. The others were all crashed, shot down, with almost everyone on board killed. And I think you can sort of decide for yourself really the extent to which it was a success, particularly bearing in mind the civilian casualties that we talked about in Neheim. But regardless of that, for me it's just an incredible story of ingenuity and bravery, and I'm really happy to have been able to make this journey on the 80th anniversary, and I hope you found it of interest too. So I've just put this bit of film in, especially for my son Ben, because he loves my ability to find tracks that are not really suitable for riding on, and I seem to manage that today. So I've done just over 100 miles so far, and it's all been fine on paved roads, but unfortunately my routing has now taken me down this kind of forest track, which is okay. Whoops! It's okay, especially as it's dry. But yeah, Ben, this one's for you. Just crossing the Lippe Canal here, which I have to check my facts, but I'm pretty sure this was one of the navigational aids used by the Lancasters flying down this way. And the Germans don't mess around building their canals if you compare them to ours. And this is one for Jane Oldfield, really. Look at these lock gates. They're absolutely huge. That's a bit different to the ones that we've done on holiday, isn't it? Here's another one for Ben. Just crossed a couple of cloud fields. It looks okay on the map, honest.